Great to be back with you all again. I'm a little embarrassed because we moved this date from a Thursday back to Wednesday just because of me, because I play concerts on Thursday nights now. However, the storm canceled our concert tomorrow night. So we could have done this tomorrow night. And so I beg your indulgence and thank you for your flexibility. It's just so great to be with you. I'm very excited to see what questions you have and comments you have and what interest you might have in following up on this curriculum I've developed. So it's just, I'm honored and humbled to be part of this. And thanks so much to Dave Long-Higgins and Michael Howard for supporting me and for giving me a little time with you tonight. I also want to thank Dr. Love, my mentor, who trained me and continues to lead me in racial justice and has strengthened my faith in so many ways. So I'm very grateful to her and blessed that she's with us tonight. So let's talk a little bit about this curriculum I've developed. My journey in racial justice started with my exposure to the United Church of Christ's white privilege curriculum. Many of you know about this. Many of you have taken it. Perhaps some of you have facilitated it. At my home church, the Federated Church in Chagrin Falls, we count now that probably we've had 100 people, over 100 people take this curriculum, both in our church and in our community. And I would say between 10 or 12 of us at the church have facilitated it. And we've been doing that for, I guess, 5 years now. So that was my entry point into racial justice. We started a social justice advocacy ministry at our church, which has many areas of social justice, racial justice just being just one of them. I happen to be the leader of that group at our church, and we're very active. Perhaps many of you have a racial justice focus group or advocacy group at your churches too. That has been a real source of joy for me as well, and also a place where I have grown. The Sacred Conversations to End Racism facilitator training further strengthened my faith in my knowledge and my passion to pursue racial justice with a faith-based grounding. It also got me back into my Bible in a big way, and I'm so thankful for that. I am now facilitating conversations around race, both in the Sacred Conversations format and in Centering God, Decentering Whiteness format now ongoing. So I've had a little experience with this very curriculum you're gonna have a short overview of tonight. So I just want to share my screen because I think that might be easier, although I love seeing all your faces and seeing all the wonderful backgrounds that people have. I see a beautiful rose window and a number of other things. It just really cheers me up to see that. Anyway, so here's what I want to show and share with you. Bear with me for a second while I pull it up. Hopefully you can all see that. And I'll get my slideshow going here. Okay, so I call it Centering God, Decentering Whiteness. You know, centering God is a very nice sentiment. Who doesn't want to center God? The subtitle Decentering Whiteness is a very important aspect of this curriculum. And I've had a few people in my church ask, why do you have to have that term whiteness in there? And so I want to start by just talking about that a little bit, because I think that deserves a definition. When I talk about whiteness, I'm not talking about skin color or you know, particular person's identity. I'm talking about a social construct that was developed on these shores by people of European descent, our ancestors, in other words. If you're a person who is considered white by the U.S. Census, for instance. It's an artificial culture that was created to separate people and create a false hierarchy, a hierarchy of human value. More about that later, but I just want to also say that you know, when Jesus cast out demons, he generally named the demon before casting it out. So it's important to call that out and name what we're trying to decenter. But more about that later. I think I already acknowledged a few people, but I also want to thank the 5 authors of the White Privilege curriculum. You may know them, our denomination president, John Darhauer, and Tracy Blackman are among those authors, and they did a wonderful job with that curriculum. And I want to thank a few people in my church, Dawn Dole, Darlene Nichols, and Susie Kowalik, who piloted this program with me in the summer, as well as my senior pastor, Hamilton Throckmorton, who many of you probably know. So I've had some real support and help putting this together. And I spoke a little bit about my background already, so I'm not going to go with that. Yeah, already covered that. The White Privilege curriculum, I believe, was put together in 2015. And as you know, a lot has happened in our country regarding racial justice and awareness and so on in the past several years. And so the curriculum needs some updating. We have been, at Federated Church, been treating it with some hamburger helper, so to speak, and adding things to it, you know, more up-to-date articles and things that we think are more current. So I had in the back of my mind for a while the idea of updating this because we were so active facilitating it. However, I ran into some issues that I thought needed to be addressed. Just simply how to update it, and also getting permission from 5 different authors who are very busy preachers and theologians. It just seemed like a pretty difficult task. I also was a little concerned that there wasn't any real Bible study in it. And I find the Bible to be a great anti-racist handbook. And I've tried to put some of that in this curriculum. So I decided to start from scratch. And Dr. Love has taught me that it's important to try to keep God at the center of everything you're doing, and realize when you have tried, or when your culture has tried, to make God in your image, which is backwards and idolatrous. I talked a little bit about whiteness. Here are the guiding principles behind it, but first I'm going to read sort of my my little advertising blurb for this, because I think it's a great way of bringing people in. So in the beginning of the participants guide, which I've composed, I say to people that are reading it, perhaps you've sought this space because you're curious about how your faith in God can work to bring people together. You want to be part of a movement which examines privilege and how it has been used to separate children of God. You want to deepen your understanding of God's word and how it can work for racial harmony in today's society. You have many questions about what you've been taught regarding race, religion, and history. You're ready to re-examine the personal beliefs, habits, and ways of behaving that have troubled you. You seek a place where you can learn, make mistakes, be vulnerable, and grow. You seek to understand how systems of oppression have been erected to subjugate groups of people and how they've adapted over time to maintain their power. You want to learn more so you can engage in activism responsibly. You know that God is our secret weapon against those who tell us we shouldn't be discussing all this and that it's impossible to solve our racial divide. If any of these statements describe you at this moment, then you're in the right place. Before engaging in the work of racial justice as people of European descent or white folks, we have some work to do, where our ancestors constructed a system which decentered God and distorted the word of God to subjugate groups of people they didn't understand. This system has adapted to each new era and remains intact today. Some seek to maintain the system through intentional words and actions, some by counting on our ignorance and silence. A cursory examination of our politics and headlines in the news shows that our current way of operating as a society is not sustainable, and it is anti-gospel. If we realize that racial injustice is a problem caused by our ancestors and maintained by us today, it is incumbent upon us to do our own work as people of European descent and not blame people of color for problems they did not cause. Thus, understanding and dismantling whiteness and recentering God in our thoughts and actions is essential work to do before we can be effective allies for racial justice. So the principles here are keeping God at the center, or recentering God, decentering whiteness, using the Bible as an anti-racist textbook. Also, my curriculum involves a reframing of how and why the Bible was written and in what context it was written in. Generally speaking, we can truly say the Bible was written during times of oppression. You think of the Hebrew Bible, you have the Egyptians as the oppressors, the Assyrians, Babylonians, many others. And you also have the prophets writing during times, say during Solomon's time, in being critical of internal oppression. Solomon, as we know, enslaved his own people and taxed them and invited other cultures into his empire in ways that were not in keeping with the covenant. We also need to recognize that in the New Testament, the main oppressor there is the Roman Empire. And reading the Bible through that lens, especially the New Testament, is extremely important for us to understand what motivations are there and who Jesus was speaking to. Also, after the times in which the Bible was written, we need to also understand that with Constantinian Christianity, the Bible was reframed as what my friend Ann Dunlap calls the victory handbook of the empire. In other words, this subversive sect of Judaism, which came to be called Christianity, took on the trappings of empire, and many of those structures and oppressive structures are in place today, especially in the white Christian church. It is necessary in order to dismantle whiteness that it is unmasked, for it operates at full strength when it is not visible, not sensed, and not seen. Here's a provocative statement that you can use with your congregants if you wish. There are no white people in the Bible and no Black people in Africa. I put these two together. Let's start with the no Black people in Africa comment. This was a statement that was made to author Isabel Wilkerson by a Nigerian playwright. She came up to her at a conference and said, you know, there are no Black people in Africa. Sounds like a crazy statement, right? Well, okay, if what she was getting at is that people in Africa don't identify as Black, generally speaking. They identify as Maasai or Zulu, or maybe they identify with their country. So when Wilkerson asked her why she said that, or what she meant by that, she followed up by saying, they're not Black, they're just people on the land, and they don't become Black until they come to America. That's when they become Black. Okay. Now let's deal with the statement that there are no white people in the Bible. Okay. Anyone who has studied the construction of whiteness in the United States will quickly learn that, among other things, the term white was not used in a legal sense to define a group of people until the 17th century in America, when in Virginia's colonial law, it became a term that was made to create a category of people. So saying there are white people in the Bible is actually an anachronism, and it has actually led to some very damaging theology. The people in the Bible who you would think of as Greeks and Romans, those people in America did not become white, enter the white culture until after World War II. You might know that in Louisiana, for instance, during Jim Crow, there were 3 categories for people. There were people of African descent that were put in one category. There were people of Anglo-Saxon origin that were put in another, and then there were Italians. Italians had a 3rd category in the law in Louisiana, and this was not unusual. So that's why I say there are no white people in the Bible and no black people in Africa. And by extension, we can also say that Jesus was not white. There's a wonderful article in the latest issue of the Christian Century about this that I encourage you all to read. A title for the article is, "In America, Jesus is Black because he was Jewish." Okay, so I leave that for you to follow up on. Maybe I can put the link in the chat. But I think it's a fascinating article and really, really helps us with a healthy reframing. We need to dismantle whiteness by looking for signs of whiteness. It sometimes, especially for people that look like me, is like the air we breathe. It's not visible, and I need to constantly train my senses to look for it and notice how it operates. Sometimes it becomes obvious in public life.
What's your message for voters of color who are concerned that without the John L. Lewis Voting Rights Act, they're not going to be able to vote in the midterm?
Well, the concern is misplaced because if you look at the statistics, African American voters are voting in just as high a percentage as Americans. A recent survey, 94% of Americans thought it was easy to vote. This is not a problem.
So sometimes they say the quiet part out loud, and whiteness appears in front of everyone for all to see. It's clear by that statement, which was made by one of our most accomplished and clever politicians, was not unintentional. And it shows very nakedly that whiteness is assumed to be the default in American society. And it is also the truth in American Christianity that is the default group that we're talking about here. So we need to look at whiteness as part of an idolatrous hierarchy of human value. It's making you over into, it's making God into the image of a white person, a white culture. It decenters God in his creation and sets up an idolatrous worship of the artificial culture of whiteness. Some attributes include the white Jesus, a very damaging visual representation. I can't tell you how many people of African descent I've spoken to that say they were raised with white Jesus in their church. It also includes the necessity or perceived necessity for using descriptors for non-white groups, such as African Americans or Asian Americans, whereas white Americans don't use that hyphenated term. All non-white people then are racialized, and white people are free to consider themselves as just people or as individuals and not part of a racialized group. Non-white individuals are commonly asked to represent their race, quote, credit to his race, whereas people that look like me are not generally asked to do so. So Toni Morrison said, in this country, American means white, everyone else has to hyphenate. So getting to the curriculum now, here's Centering God, Decentering Whiteness, what it is and what it isn't. It is not a book study. Book studies have their place, but this is meant to be much more than a book study. It is not a DEI training. It is not something that you could encounter in your workplace. What it is an 8-session transformative experience leading to a life change and a faith-based anti-racist action. It is intended primarily for participants of European descent. Generally speaking, people of European descent, white people, need to do some pre-work before they can engage in healthy conversation with non-white people. I have witnessed this personally in groups I have led. People of color tend to become exhausted or impatient with white people in the groups, with their ignorance, frankly, and with their constant centering of themselves in the conversation. They take up more space than others do in these conversations. So I think this also is the reason why the white privilege curriculum was developed originally to help level up people of European descent so they can engage in healthy interactions with non-white participants. Now, this curriculum can be facilitated with a group of multiple ethnicities. And in fact, I am doing so right now in New Hampshire with the New Hampshire Conference. But you need to have certain guidelines in place. One of our group covenant in New Hampshire has a few guidelines. One, a person of African descent, because the ethnicity that we have there is that we have 3 people of African descent. They are never asked to speak for their entire race, and they are never asked to do other people's work. They're never asked to explain things. If they want to explain something, they do that with their own free will. And there are other guidelines that are making this work, but it is not an easy thing to do. So the rundown of the curriculum is 8 sessions. Those sessions can be spread out over a once a month period for 8 months, or in New Hampshire, I'm doing it every 2 weeks. There is fairly extensive homework. This is not show up and listen to the lecture. There's small group discussion both in the sessions and in between the sessions. I made small groups that are given homework to do on their own, and they present in the sessions the work they do in between the sessions. The capstone of the experience is the composition of an anti-racist rule of life. I thank Dave Long-Higgins for his inspiration in this aspect of centering God, decentering whiteness. It's based on the Rule of Benedict, and Benedict divided the monastic life into 2 categories, prayer and labor. And so if we think of prayer as, in this sense, for this curriculum, not just prayer, but yes, prayer, but also continuing education, internal work that you need to do, that would be that part of it. And the labor would be finding groups to join, getting your own initiative going, finding the aspect of anti-racist work that you particularly are passionate about and want to get involved with. So coming out of it, the participants will have 2 different things. They'll have an anti-racist action plan, which might be, something like, I don't know, joining, showing up for racial justice, attending meetings, getting involved with their activities, and then also the other part of it is the anti-racist personal rule, which might be structuring your prayer life, getting a book list of things to do, attending webinars, and that sort of thing. Why is such a course needed at this time? A little rationale for this course. UCC has declared racism a public health crisis. People are dying of racism, okay? We are a predominantly white denomination. 75% of white people have no close relationship with a person of color. Our biases are unavoidable. If anyone has ever taken the Harvard IAT test, that's a pretty eye-opening test to take. And many of us were poorly educated about the history and contemporary reality of systemic racism in the nation and the church. Also, people are at work now to make sure that we don't learn about this sort of thing in our schools. And many churches are resistant to this sort of education. As people of faith, we want to build relationships with people of faith who are different from us. And I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to try something new. Okay, now I'm going to go to the course outline so you can get an idea of how the 8 sessions play out. First, the methodology. Using Bible study, personal anecdotes, articles, videos, book excerpts, and I've made up a participant's guide that's about 60 pages long that each participant has to use. We'll unmask white privilege and show how it perpetuates systemic and personal racist policies and behaviors which are anti-gospel. Participants will be guided through the course using a cycle of reflection, reaction, response, and re-envisioning. The cycle looks like this. The first stage is reflection, and the first 2 gatherings of the 8 sessions are devoted to reflection. So in reflection, the participants internalize the material learned through reading, viewing, and Bible study. They relearn history, politics, and religion to unmask racist teachings and policies which benefit or benefited people of European descent. Journaling is an important part of this curriculum, where people can write down their thoughts and ideas as they go through the course. And this eventually, the journal actually is sort of the raw material for your personal rule of life that is one of the capstones at the end. The next 2 gatherings are reaction, where you react to the material presented, noticing emotions and thought patterns. This is especially important because many people of European descent, because we can go back to our comfortable homes and not deal with it, whereas people of African descent, they're Black people 24/7. We can go back and exist as individuals, and it tends to allow us to intellectualize or spiritualize things that are visceral. So part of this is I composed this section to help people move from their heads to their hearts, from their minds to their bodies, so that they have a full body experience with this. So that's what that 3rd and 4th gathering deals with in some way. Then the response, gathering 6 and 7, we start to form public and personal responses to the course material based upon your reflection, and that should be reactions. And you share the responses in the sessions. For instance, in the New Hampshire group last week, each person in the group presented on an area of systemic racism that they were passionate about fighting. We had some people talk about healthcare disparities, others about voting rights, to give you an idea. Then the final 2 sessions are devoted to re-envisioning what Dr. King called the beloved community. What does that mean for us today? Re-envision to discern what changes need to happen in policies and structures in your church and society and in your personal behavior to promote the beloved community. Engage in activism and advocacy which push for these changes based upon the process of reflection, reaction, response, and re-envisioning. And then ritual. Ritual is important. I think to acknowledge spiritual growth in the process of dismantling your whiteness and the building of an anti-racist persona, celebrate through ritual. It's not a one-time event. It should be repeated each time you complete the cycle or recognize growth. Something we did in the way of a ritual, although ritual is hard to do over Zoom, So I had people write down at the end of one of the sessions something they wanted to relinquish, write it down on a piece of paper, and then carefully and safely burn it. So we had a ritual burning, and I did not have any reports of household fires after that. So I think it was a fairly successful ritual. But there are many ways of acknowledging personal growth or barriers that are overcome in a session. And then repeat the cycle, because this is endless. This is a lifelong journey. And people on this journey constantly cycle through these stages that I just outlined. And so now just a little bit about what's in the actual gatherings. In the first gathering, we talk about humanity's common origin. We examine the Genesis creation stories and how God created us to be together. There's a sense of God as being lonely, or humankind as being lonely, and the creation is there to create a community and not to be subdued and divided, and so on. We talk about how the Bible is a text in cultures, and how at Pentecost, each of the persons present at Pentecost heard the Spirit speaking in their own language. And that's very important. There wasn't the King James Bible being spoken at Pentecost. And we also discuss how Jesus is the medium through which God restores the unity for humankind. In Ephesians, it says, in himself, one new humanity in place of two. In Gathering 2, we talk about a concept known as the freedom of God. This has to do with the ineffable quality of God and the urge that we have to control or co-opt God. We talk about the Mosaic community, where God appeared in a burning bush, where he appeared on a mountaintop, or appeared in a cloud of thunder. It was not readily available and somewhat capricious. In Exodus 33, Yahweh says to Moses, I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, but you cannot see my face. It's a very different God from the one we contrast with Solomon's kingdom, where Solomon built a temple, and in a sense, God was then given office hours and was part of a hierarchy with a more of a controlled access to God in a certain way. And how does this relate to our church today? Do we have a church where people go on Sunday to be prayed on and sermon preached to, or is the church beyond the walls? Is the church in the community? Is it a communal church? Another way of talking about these two different societies is one a people's church and one a ruler's church. There's a great book by Joseph Barnt called Becoming an Anti-Racist Church. Lists these two categories of church that you can talk about. We also talk about in this gathering humankind's attempt to find out if God is on our side. We examine Lincoln's second inaugural address, where he says that both Confederate and Union read the same Bible, and that Lincoln, in his humility, was not 100% sure that God was on his side, and had deep questions about this. We talk about Jacob wrestling with the angel, or with God, as an allegory for humankind's desire to control God. We discuss white Jesus and how there was no such thing as race in the Bible, and race was constructed quite a bit later. And we share restorative images of Jesus and God. In Gathering 3, we talk about the construction of whiteness and how that works, and how the Bible was used to erect this hierarchy. How for instance, the verse in Genesis where humankind is said to have been given dominion and subdue the earth. Whereas in the Message translation, it is simply humankind is to be responsible to the earth, not to have dominion and subdue. And we talk, then we get into some more videos and resources which show the development of whiteness as a hierarchy and a construct. We talk about eradicating racist myths in Scripture, actually listing the damaging, the verses that were used, misused, I should say, to create, to justify enslavement in this country and so on, and talk about how they were used by people of European descent in our country. In Gathering 4, we talk about the concept of whiteness as property. Here we talk about the doctrine of discovery and about the various Exodus stories. And I think it's important to talk about the Exodus story from different perspectives. We explore the Black liberation theology interpretation of the Exodus story. We talk about the indigenous perspective of the Exodus story, where the indigenous actually identify with the Canaanites and not the Israelites, the ones that were in the land that were conquered and slaughtered. So a lot to discuss there in that one. In Gathering 5, we move into helping participants develop anti-racist habits. We talk about some of the personal behaviors. We talk about microaggressions. We talk about white fragility. We talk about how to have difficult conversations about race. We talk about how to call someone in instead of calling them out when you're discussing racism. Those sorts of things are discussed there. The Bible verse that guides that gathering is the famous verse from Philippians 2, where Jesus empties himself. That's known as kenosis. And we explore how kenosis is a wonderful a metaphor for decentering your whiteness, dismantling whiteness, emptying yourself of your whiteness. In Gathering 6, we start looking at how to challenge systemic racism. The guiding Bible verse there is Ephesians 6:12. Our struggle is not against enemies of flesh and blood, but against principalities and power. And this puts the emphasis on challenging structural policies instead of demonizing people. And at this point, each participant is asked to choose a certain area of systemic racism they feel passionate about. So housing, education, criminal justice, healthcare disparities, voting rights. There's so many areas to choose. We try not to encourage people to boil the ocean with this, but to look at a very specific area that they feel passionate about. And the final two are developing an anti-racist action plan. This follows naturally from the work that's been done in identifying an area of anti-racist work that you want to get involved with. It could be just making people aware of groups that are already doing good work in their area, that sort of thing. And then the personal rule. We can talk more about that, but it could be as simple as structuring your prayer life, or making a reading list for yourself, or attending webinars on anti-racism or leading sessions yourself. So anyway, that's the end of my presentation, and I'd love to take questions now.
Barry, let me, on behalf of the group, first of all, just say a deep word of thanks to you for, the really important work you have done and are doing and are inviting us to. So it is a real gift. I think maybe I'm seeing some questions here in our chat. I want to come back. Jennifer asks, congregation has done similar studies on anti-racism and as well as other advocacy and relationship building work. Two questions. How does the social justice group who has done this kind of study work use the work they've done to analyze the bylaws and procedural documents of their own parish to confront whiteness, especially when not everyone in the church has gone through this kind of course? So I don't know if we want to start there. That's an important question and a good one.
Yeah, that's an extremely important point, because bylaws and Robert's Rules of Order are a symptom of whiteness anyway, aren't they? I mean, they really are. And what we're trying to do is build a new community. We're trying to do something that's never been done before, in a certain way. We can't talk about reconciling with people that don't look like us because there was never a situation of harmony to begin with in this country. So we do need to rethink how we do church. I would point you to Joseph Barnes' Becoming an Anti-Racist Church, because there are specific suggestions he has about how to structure your church's governance system to make it more inclusive and less hierarchical.
Barry, there's a second question here connected. How does this kind of work dovetail with what others in the community are doing around anti-racism? For example, I see many churches that are creating their own anti-racist action plans, but in my city, Black leaders have created a new racial equity and inclusion council that is creating an action plan for the whole city. After having done some of the work, how do we encourage the congregation to get out of its silo and engage in the work that others in the community are leading, i.e. not creating the wheel or centering ourselves as white saviors, but instead coming alongside BIPOC as an ally?
Yeah, first of all, I think the word ally should be used as a verb and not a noun. Allyship is earned. It's earned. You don't get a gold star or a nameplate that says ally. So I just want to name that. I think that's an ongoing activity at which I succeed and fail on a regular basis. So I think that word is, that's a difficult word. People I work with that are from non-white communities say more. They want solidarity, they want justice, they want accomplices. They don't want allies so much. But getting to your question, I think you're onto something there. You don't want to be inventing your own wheel and finding out that there are better wheels out there. That's really, really important, and it's a waste of time to be doing something on your own as a church. I can point out to what my church is doing right now. We have partnerships with a local arts organization which has a social justice function in its mission, and also there's a community life collaborative in our neighborhood that is not faith-based, and we collaborate with them and with two other UCC churches in our area on things. Also, finding out, first of all, you should just go to this Racial Equity and Inclusion Council, go to their meetings and find out what's going on there. Don't be shy, go there, and especially go there to learn about what's being done. Because, I'm constantly made aware that people of African descent have been telling us what we need to know for centuries, and we just haven't been listening. I mean, W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, they told us everything we need to know 100 years ago, and so it's just been our being in a bubble and our lack of curiosity or our trepidation about putting ourselves in non-white spaces that has led us to ignorance, and also situations where we seem to think we know better. So I would go to those places and find out. And I'm going to tell a little story on myself, since I hope we have a little time for this. Here's a story where I learned something. Okay, I am our church is in partnership with a predominantly African American, African descended church in Cleveland, and I have become really good friends with the pastor there, and I've gotten to know some of their efforts. One thing they have is a wonderful jobs mentoring program. And I was excited to learn about it. And I went in and sat in on a session. They invited me there. And I got so excited after the session. I just thought it was wonderful. I got out my checkbook and wrote a check. And I got the assistant pastor back in a room, and we were talking about it. And I said, you know, our church has this Christmas Eve offering. And our Christmas Eve offering is a big deal at the Federated Church. We give away you know, a 5-figure sum to a group every year. And sometimes it's a lot of money. And so I thought, hey, you know, it's right around the time we start nominating people for this, or organizations for this. And I said, you know, we have this Christmas Eve offering. I said to the assistant pastor, this would be really you know, I wonder if your church would be interested in this. We could help fund that jobs program. I think it's terrific. And the minister said to me, you know, no thanks, the church doesn't need the money. Okay. And what I learned was that this program had been going on since the 1960s and had been recognized at the White House several times and had major foundation support. And I was going in there being a white savior. I thought we're going to really make this thing take off. They don't need us, okay? We needed to learn from them, okay? They were already doing something amazing, okay? That was my white saviorism. So I think going into this Racial Equity and Inclusion Council and just listening would be really great. Take notes, ask questions, you know, get to know some people. That's a great way to get involved.
Thank you, Barry. I want to invite, if there are other questions, either if you want to use the raise your hand emoji, or go ahead and put your questions in the chat feature. That's also a great way.
So Dave, I also wanted to say that I'm going to start a group, facilitating this course with a group this fall, and I have a couple people from my church lined up. But I just put it out there, if people in this meeting want to be part of this group, or you want, you know, people from your church to be part of this group, I'm going to start in the fall. I'd love that. I will say this: more than 15 people in our group is unwieldy. You know, so but I would love to have, you know, some people from the Anti-Racist Network in this that want to do it. So keep that in mind.
That encourages me around two things, Barry. One is we'll certainly get the word out, and a number of you, this may be your first experience in this circle that Michael mentions. We're having quarterly engagements, and if you would like to be more in the loop of the communication and would be willing to share your email in the chat box along with your name, we're certainly glad to include you in our more regular email posting. There are other resources that we share, and that's another way to stay connected. So if you want to do that, and we won't spam your email, we promise you that, but it is a way to stay a little bit more tightly connected to that. So there was a question about the relationship, Barry, that you described with this other congregation. Can you say a little bit more about that? How it formed? How's that developed, and so forth?
Yeah, it started when my senior pastor Hamilton and his wife had a week off from church, and they had worked with the senior pastor, Reverend Paul Sadler Sr., at the national office, or knew him, and they just went to their church and worshiped with them, and you know, it developed very naturally, and I got to know Paul, and we're good friends, and we go there and worship with them. We're doing a Sacred Conversations group right now between our two churches, and yeah, we have hosted them for a cookout. We went to a movie together. You know, we've done all kinds of things, MLK Day together, that sort of thing. No.
Thank you. The building of relationships. Yeah. Others, questions?
You know, you've all been part of book studies or DEI things, and it's kind of like, you know, what happens after that? And it's very easy for the ball to get dropped. And my hope here is to build something that people can take with them and are emotionally affected by and transformed by, and want to give it to others. So that's what I want to have happen here with this.
Barry, I have a question. This is
Sure.
Sandy Lindahl.
Hi.
Hi, I have a good friend whose church, UCC Church in Florida, just this past Sunday, voted on a covenant to become an anti-racist church. And they are doing some activities to try to live into that. And I'm wondering if your material is available for them as a possibility.
I mean, you know, the thing is that my material is still in development. I think I could safely say it's not visually appealing yet. And I'm revising it as I go, and I'd be happy to communicate with them. But you know, Joseph Barnes has a different approach in his Becoming the Anti-Racist Church. He says, go through the process first and then make the statement. In other words, do the work first and then make the statement that you're an anti-racist church. I think a lot of us are really big on making a statement and then not quite living up to it. You know, I really like that approach.
Well, they did quite a bit, but they realized that they're, you know, of course, not done.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
Sounds good. Yep. Put them in touch. I'd be happy to see if I can help.
Are there others? Dr. Love, I know that I didn't talk with you about this ahead of time, but I just feel as though we need some, I need to have folks hear straight from you in terms of the work, the Join the Movement piece, and just the work that you're guiding so many of us in. Would you mind offering just I'm going to offer you the platform of shameless promotion, friend. So, you know, because I think folks need to know more than we've already spoken about, if you're willing.
Thank you, Dave, for the invitation to speak. First, I want to just acknowledge that Barry is an outstanding facilitator. And I am sitting here feeling like the work that we've done through Sacred Conversations to End Racism has been both communal and life-changing. And as much as I train, I am also learning from those who go through this process. And it is the work that has to be done. And so this particular work started in 2018. There are two cohorts that are certified, and that there's the 2021 group just finished, and others will be returning. So this is a lifelong journey. And so, Barry, thank you for your hard work, and I'm going to share this with the community, and they'll be sending you kudos as well. But the work that is happening at the national office is really important right now as we capture stories and join the movement to end racism, toward racism, is really about capturing stories from those in local churches and communities that are doing the hard work of anti-racism. The story of our church is important, the United Church of Christ. So we have stories that are coming from conference ministers and associations, local church pastors, community organizers. We're looking at the arts and music and the ways in which this movement started with the church, the ancient church, the first church, the movement in the tent across the land. It is the movement of the church in the first century. That's a movement. It was radical, it was different, and those stories were told orally. They began as oral stories, and we're collecting oral stories and join the movement. We also want to model stories that talk about the deep work that is done. And we also want to have on the website, and I'm going to ask, where's Michael Howard? I saw him.
I'm here.
Okay, www.jointhemovementucc.org.
Yeah, that's in the chat there, Dr. Love.
Thank you. You can go to the website. It's a beautifully developed website. You will learn more about the stories, the resources, and the ways in which these stories invite others to be part of Join the Movement. This is a 3-year campaign. We put a sunset on 3 Great Loves. This was introduced at General Synod 33. It was a way to raise $5 million over the next 3 years to support churches that are doing racial justice work, just as you are doing here. And so we want to make sure that we have an endowment as well as money available to look at reparatory justice, healing ministries in churches that are doing this work, and for those who want to develop the deep work of activism and advocacy. And so there, if you go to the website, you'll see videos, you will see ways to get involved. You can donate. As well, our capital campaign will more than likely start either May or June. But it is an opportunity for you to ask questions, to connect across the nation. This is both a national and a global campaign of collecting stories. We want to see that those who share stories are inspired and then perhaps reach out to a conference in California or in Seattle, so that we are not working or doing this work in silos, that we are creating the very movement that Jesus created, and that we don't have any barriers. We don't have any cultural barriers. Our language changes the way that you have heard Barry talk about. People of African descent and European descent. We honor people and their land and their heritages. And so we want to create this community where we are learning from one another, sharing our stories orally, and then making sure that we're archiving them for the next generation. And what a gift it is to be able to say that the United Church of Christ is not only a leader in the racial justice movement, but the social justice, the political justice, the economic justice, and the environmental justice. And so we are doing this because we believe that we are one, but how do we live that out if we are not talking to our siblings of faith? So thank you, Dave, for this opportunity. Please visit the website. There it is. Thank you, Michael. And you can go back up. And so go all the way up to the top, Michael. And so what you'll see is the Join the Movement that gives you the background. You can share your story. There's a form that you can use to do that. Scroll down, Michael. Okay. And each section has a different color. So these are the featured stories. And you can scroll through, you can hit the tabs, you can learn more about what is happening in other local congregations, what a movement is. You can scroll down, and it has the tabs for you to view more stories and then submit a story. There are resources, an abundance of resources that you can download as well and learn from. And then there's an events and news page that lets you know what is happening with Join the Movement. Once you become a subscriber, you can then have access to webinars. They are always open to the rest of the entire church, but webinars and retreats. We also have opportunities for those who subscribe to come together to have storytelling and story sharing. So we're doing this for the church, with the church, and we are the church. So this is not about a particular building. This is about people and people's movement to end racial justice. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Dave.
Oh, Dr. Love, thank you, and thank you so much for being with us this evening, and your influence is large, and we are so glad for your many gifts to be leading this work in our life together. So I want to see if there are any other questions. I'm aware of our time, and I know, Michael, while we're if there aren't any, I want to have folks be aware of the wonderful resource that we share across our whole life. So some of you have heard me rehearse this litany before, but we are a web of relationships, certainly, and we're sharing our resources across our life so that we're not having to double up in that. And Michael's been curating those resources for the anti-racism work on the Living Water site, and we'll be, I'm sure, if we haven't already, linking the Join the Movement to that. But Michael, I'm wondering if maybe we could see those. And Tim, I see your hand raised. Maybe before we do that, let me, if you'll go ahead there, and then we'll.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I just, want to make a comment. Barry, I am the director of the outreach program at St. Paul's Community Church in Cleveland, which has been partner for Federated for many years. And, I listen to what you're saying, and I can appreciate how people must feel. I've been spending the last 50 years trying to disengage myself from my whiteness. I've got 5 Black children. I, work in an inner city, and I've lived in, and I've, been in inner city work for years and years, and engaged with a wide variety of peoples. And I identified what you said about coming as a savior. I mean, that's the thing that I first did is, I knew it all. I was smart and I could just lay it out. And, I found out real quick that didn't work. And I think, as in approaching this, we've got to look at your course as a beginning. You're not going to walk into it and come out of it, as, know it all, got rid of all your guilt, got rid of all your ignorance, everything else. And we've been part of that for so many years, it takes forever. And a lot of that takes a sharing with each other and talking about it and willing to discuss some of the hard facts that are coming up and acknowledge some of the feelings that we have and not feel guilty about them. I mean, they came as part of our life and work within that. And I know myself, I can be a little unforgiving of people that bring some of those attitudes in. I'm really kind of like, okay, we've got over that. Let's get something done and let's move forward type of thing. So I think that You know, listening to this takes some sitting down and thinking. And it's going to for me too. It's, you know, as far as what I heard you said, and, you know, not expect that we're going to come out of listening what you said with an answer to all that we want to, you know, engage on this and how we go forward. So I guess, you know, part of my advice is, you know, listen, talk, and think, and then, you know, give things a chance to move forward.
Tim, that's very wise what you say. I think courses like what I've designed work best when people are willing to be vulnerable and they want to change and they're okay with being uncomfortable. So often white comfort trumps black pain in our society. And we need to be okay with being uncomfortable, with being dissatisfied and wanting to change.
Barry, that's a setup that I didn't even ask you to offer for me to parenthetically remind folks of some really serious and concerning bills that are in the State House here in Ohio. There's a concerted effort to legalize the limitation of what can be taught in public schools and in other venues. And there is an organization called Honesty in Education, because so much of the critical race theory language has been co-opted and misinterpreted and reframed and so forth. It's a work to work against these bills. And one of the key dimensions, and we've all heard it, is we shouldn't tell the full story because it will make our children feel uncomfortable. When in fact, our discomfort is probably the necessary opening for growth. So I'm just naming that into the space. That's a work I'm personally very interested in engaging along with others. And Honesty in Education is a group here in Ohio that's working on this. It's actually called honestyforeducation.org. Maybe, yeah, thank you, Terry Lynn, appreciate that. You can find out more about that. Michael, let me turn to you, because there is I know folks have a lot of resources. I think the arrangement of part of this network is to help folks find the kinds of things they might find most helpful in the setting or the place they are. And there are many things out there. Do you mind doing a screen share just so folks can see?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Just a couple of things as I shift into that. One is, you know, I thank you all for putting your emails in the chat. If you would like to stay connected with us, please go ahead and do that. And we'll make sure that you get the emails about when our meetings are and what we have coming up. I have worked quite a bit on our anti-racism resource library. And so this is a shared resource from the Heartland Conference and the Living Water Association. And the address I'll put in the chat is livingwaterone.org/anti-racism. And I want to show you here just how at the beginning, you know, here's this link here takes you to our previous, the last meeting that we had in November, when we heard from Reverend Dr. Jack Sullivan. And so his presentation is there. All the resources that he offered us is there. But then also we have links to wider church resources. Join the Movement is here listed as one. We also have a fall reading list. So this is my shameless plug to get everybody here who's on the call today. If you have a book that you're using, or even a resource that you're using that you would recommend, feel free to share that with us. And, you know, we'll be putting together a reading list of what people are using and what resources that they have. But Also, I wanted to let you know, this resource library is not like it's not a whole list of hyperlinks that you click and have to sort through. We're trying to do a really good job of curating resources. And with that being said, I would prefer you to think this less as just a bunch of places where you can find resources on anti-racism and more as an ecosystem. Because just like join the movement, I know that everyone on this call is involved in this work in some ways. And those of you who have used different resources and found them helpful, it's good for us to know that, because otherwise you're just up to the mercy of whatever Dave or I or somebody like Barry can put together. But it's much more effective, I think, if we share what's been effective and what we've done. And so if you would feel free, share with us what resources that you're using, how well that they have worked. And we'll be happy to include those as we look through them. So again, I'll put the website for this in on the chat, and I want to also say, if I can, Dave, just how important I think it would be. Take a look at Chisholm's resources. They're the Anti-Racism Center for Chisholm at chhsm.org. And they've got some really fantastic resources. And one of those is a course that you can take and go at your own pace. I don't know if you're still around here, Elise, but I wanted to at least give you that plug. Yeah, Elise, can you say something really quick about Chisholm's Anti-Racism Center?
Sure. Sorry, I've been dealing with dogs and children in my background. But yeah, I can put that in the chat. Our Anti-Racism Center has a variety, sort of like the hyperlink model, but they are categorized. And then we have the course, which is a self-paced free online course that was made in response to the General Senate resolution on racism as a public health crisis. So I'll put both those in there. Everything's free and available online, and I'm very happy to engage with anyone that has questions about that. We're finishing out of going through the whole course. With Chisholm, we've met every other week, and we're finishing that out. We have a couple more sessions left, but it's been cool to go through the whole course with a whole group of folks for the past several months. So I'm sure I'll give updates on their feedback after that's done. Thanks.
Thanks, Elise. And again, I know that these are, the three websites we've mentioned tonight are not the only places to find resources. And so if you would, feel free to share with us what resources you're using, where you're finding them. And I think that would help us along the way. Back to you, Dave.
Okay. Well, our next scheduled gathering is May 5th. That is a Thursday at 7. And we'll be getting more information out as that date gets closer, along with the topic and presenter for that. I just want to say a word of deep appreciation again to you, Barry, for your leadership tonight, and for the introduction of this resource that I think has great, maybe just a visual thank you from all of us, whatever form you want that to take. But especially appreciate your willingness for folks to reach out to you if they want to engage this work or get connected with others. One of the things we've talked about is, because Zoom has strangely been, if anything, is normalized in life, Zoom at least has become more common in our lives, right? And that it does facilitate the opportunity for this kind of meeting like we've had tonight, but also for study groups. So if maybe you're in a congregation where you don't feel like you've got a core of folks who are ready to engage this, or maybe you're tired of talking to the same old people and you want to talk to new people. There are creative ways to gather, and if you're interested in those kinds of gatherings, we certainly want to help facilitate that. So make those wishes known, certainly. You all are a blessing, because you've arrived in this space to grow and go into the world. And this is, many of you have heard me say this before, a long urgency. So the work is urgent and the work is long and necessary. And because of that, we cannot, not only can we not do it alone nor can we just do it together, but we always, as Dr. Love always reminds me when I'm in her presence, it's always empowered by God's Spirit. So in that, I would like to close us with a prayer and then hope that you will be blessed into the evening for good rest. Will you join your heart with mine? Holy and gracious God, love of our lives, strength of our days, holder of our weariness, evoker of our wonder, daring dreamer in our midst. We thank you. We thank you that you call us to holy work, that your world may be more whole, not by our effort alone, but by the grace of your Holy Spirit, persistently pouring itself into our lives and into the life of the whole creation. So now at the end of another day, as we have been encouraged and challenged, stimulated, deepened, drawn into a renewed awareness of your deep desire for the full flourishing of the whole human family and the creation. As we have been drawn to this place, redraw your daring dream in our dreams as we rest, that in our rising we may be renewed and strengthened, that by our words and our deeds, something of your good will and way may blossom even in winter. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, friends, thank you and blessings on you, and good to be with you, and take care.